Hey, we are the Lab Doctors. I'm Amanda.
I'm Dorothy.
And I'm Zhao Yong.
We are biomedical researchers who realized we still have a lot to learn about science.
So why not join us on this quest?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lab Doctors podcast. So this week we're going to be talking about aphantasia.
Didn't we talk about this before?
Do we?
Or maybe among ourselves.
Oh, okay. Do you remember how it started?
It's about when you close your eyes and you cannot picture anything.
Yes.
Or was it like we were saying, can you imagine?
I just know
or
the stupid
close your
star.
eyes and imagine. Yeah.
So one of our colleagues came in one day and said he saw this Reddit thread on a simple aphantasia test. So I'll post the link, or we can actually post the image of that thread if listeners want to follow along on Instagram or YouTube. But basically the test involves asking individuals to visualize a red star. Then there are 6 images. You choose from the 6 images which most closely corresponds to what you see in your mind. So basically you close your eyes and picture a red star. So we can do this again, but basically it ranges from blurry nothingness to a fuzzy outline of a star, and the most vivid being an actual star. So let's do a quick recap on what each of us sees. So I sent on WhatsApp, if you all don't remember, but basically there's 1 to 6.
I would like to think that I can see a red star. I don't know if I can see it or like my brain's telling me to see a red star.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's a 2 or 3.
Okay.
Or maybe-
I'm usually between a 1 or 2.
I would like to think I'm a 6, which is
Okay.
the full red star.
Okay, so what is aphantasia? Basically, aphantasia describes a phenomenon where people are unable or have difficulty forming mental images in their mind. So the basis of the phenomenon itself is not a new thing, and it actually dates back to at least 1880s, but some people say like even earlier than that. But in terms of like recorded, Sir Francis Galton asked participants to rate illumination, definition, and colouring of their breakfast table that morning. And he found that for some people, they couldn't even picture it in their mind at all. So as for the official term, aphantasia was coined by neurologist and professor Adam Zeman, along with his team in 2015. So it's a pretty new thing. Basically combining the prefix a, which means without or lacking, and the Greek word phantasia, which means imagination or appearance. So Zeman's interest was sparked by an encounter with one of his patients who had recently undergone a surgery. So after this surgery, the patient realized that he could no longer visualize images in his mind. So basically before, when he like closed his eyes and visualized something, he could, but then like after the surgery, he couldn't anymore. He said he couldn't picture faces of his friends and family, and he just couldn't picture anything anymore. So
That's something I feel like I would never realize until you tell me to.
exactly.
Picture
So
it.
I think this is something that like, because our experience is the only experience that we can know at the time. So like when people hear about aphantasia, the reaction is either, wait, you can see something, or like, wait, you can't see anything when you close your eyes, because like you wouldn't know, right? So that's why like this person is like, he had one experience and then like another experience, and that's why. So it sparked a lot of interest, and like more people came up to this researcher, Adam Zeman, and like that's how it all started, and that's how people started looking into it more. Okay, so what do you think is the prevalence of aphantasia?
It was like what, 1%, 2%.
I was going for 90%.
No, like full aphantasia.
Full aphantasia.
Yeah, like means you can't picture anything. So if on the 1 to 6, like maybe you're like 1 all the time.
Yeah, I think it's
then
like
maybe-
1 to 2%.
Yeah, so early reports by Zeman and his team estimated around 1 to 2%. But more recently in 2021, researchers estimate that it's more likely around 2 to 5% of the population who have this lifelong inability to generate images in their mind, or congenital aphantasia, meaning it's from birth. So one difficulty in really identifying this prevalence is that aphantasia is not really a yes or no condition. It exists on a spectrum. And to me, it was fascinating that humans probably experience the world so differently, but we don't even know. Okay, so for listeners, if you're still like fuzzy on what this is, say I ask you to imagine something like an apple. So you close your eyes and think of an apple. Okay, someone without aphantasia can probably conjure an image in their mind and can actually see the apple vividly, from the ridges and the dents on the apple to the color and shape of it. And on the other hand, someone with aphantasia could also tell you all these things, but they would be able to explain it in concept and describe facts about it. But they would not actually be able to experience a mental image to accompany that knowledge.
I think it's very funny that Tom and I just closing our eyes throughout this episode.
It's fine. It's
Trying
good.
to manifest color, but it's just not working.
Yeah, same. So I cannot tell if I have mild aphantasia or like...
Yeah, I'm trying to manifest color. I'm seeing like outlines, but I'm not seeing color.
I'm not seeing anything.
Which is fine. So aphantasia is an area of active research. So there's actually a lot going on and a lot of things are changing. So today I just decided to focus on two main things, which is which part of the brain is involved and correlations with cognitive function and traits.
It's just gonna be a black apple, okay? A black apple is fine, right? Like there are black
rotten
apples.
Are you sure you're seeing a black apple? Because a black apple is actually something, you know?
What's a black apple?
Rotten apples are actually like...
I know. It's just going to be that. That was what I was choosing to visualize all
It's just
along.
the Apple logo. Just the outline of the Apple logo.
I can do Apple logo.
Like if you can see this.
No, like it's just white, right? Yeah, I can do white.
Okay, so figuring out which part of the brain is involved started with acquired aphantasia. So if you remember the case that we talked about earlier, the patient who lost his ability for mental imagery. So using functional MRI scanning, Zeman and his team found that brain activation patterns when looking at pictures of famous people had no significant difference from normal controls. So meaning people with aphantasia and normal controls, when they are using their eyes, the brain activity is the same.
Okay.
So once the patient tried to visualize these famous faces mentally, he failed to engage visual parts of his brain compared to the controls. So specifically, there was a significant reduction in activation patterns across the posterior networks or towards the back of the brain. So this included the occipital cortex, which is responsible for processing visual information from the eyes, as well as the parietal cortex, which plays a role in spatial awareness and attention. Okay, so what about people who experience aphantasia from birth, or at least as long as they can remember? So a more recent study compared the brain activity, also using fMRI, from 3 groups. So 24 people with aphantasia, meaning you can't form a mental image, 20 people with mid-range imagery vividness, and 25 people with hyperphantasia.
Wow.
So the last group is
What do you mean hyperphantasia? Does it mean instead of one star, they see many stars?
No, it means they can see the red star. So
Okay,
the last
fine.
group is described as people with imagery as vivid as real seeing.
But why is it hyper? Why can't it just be phantasia?
Yeah, it sounds like even in normal life, then like, can they even trust what they are seeing?
I don't know.
It's like, you know, if I can visualize by closing my eyes, then I should be able to visualize opening my eyes as well, if that makes sense. Like I can manifest a star. You know, I don't know. Is that why it's hyper? You know, it's like I'm seeing more things than is actually there.
I think because you can conjure things.
Yeah, they're like witches and wizards.
So initially, like some people said maybe it's a communication thing. So maybe people are saying like they can see, but like maybe they can't. The brain scans revealed that the hyperphantasia group had a stronger connection between the visual network and the prefrontal cortices. In contrast, in individuals with aphantasia, these regions may be less active or less well connected, which may make it difficult for them to create or experience mental images in the same way. Okay, so let's do a speed round of their other findings. Apparently, people with hyperphantasia are more likely to be synesthetic. You know, they can see color. Yeah, but apparently no correlation to whether you are more sensitive to other stimuli. Okay, so how do you think the groups performed in standard memory tests?
The one with hyperphantasia is very good at memory.
All groups perform equally well in standard memory tests. So in terms of like just normal memory, actually there's no difference. But what about autobiographical memory or the ability to remember events that have taken place in your life?
Oh, hyper is better.
Yeah.
Hyperphantasia was better than the mid-range group, and that group was better than people with aphantasia.
That's so sad. It's like I cannot recall my past.
As vividly.
well.
Yeah. It's not that you can't, but not as well.
Yeah, but it's like I cannot picture, let's say like, oh, last time I was at this mama store buying food. I cannot picture that if I have aphantasia.
You can't picture it, but then like there are other ways around it. So like you probably remember the emotions, you probably remember the smells, you probably remember like other things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably had to open my eyes and draw it out.
Yes. So what about imagination?
Yeah, then they cannot imagine the aphantasia people.
Hyper better lah.
Yeah.
So people with hyperphantasia were able to produce richer descriptions of imagined scenarios than controls and the aphantasia group. So what about facial recognition? Do you think it's affected?
No, because facial recognition, you open your eyes, ma.
No, as in like...
I think no.
So the aphantasia group had a lower ability to recognize faces.
Why? Because they cannot picture the face, like they cannot recollect the face.
As well. So they have slightly more trouble recognizing faces.
Oh. So maybe if someone always forgets like who you are, you'd be like, you got aphantasia?
Maybe.
Like some people just cannot remember faces that well, right? Like they take a while longer to get to know someone, like remember.
Okay.
Yes, but that's it. I think there's a lot of studies in like figuring out how people with aphantasia or without aphantasia use their brain and how they recall stuff and like memory. So there's not only one way to remember something.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'll get into is they also made the participants do a personality test. So it's the revised NEO or the Big Five or Ocean, if you all remember. So they found no overall difference between the groups for neuroticism and agreeableness. So maybe I'll just ask you the ones where they found a difference. So which group do you think showed reduced extroversion?
The aphantasia group.
Yeah. And which group do you think showed increased openness?
The hyper one.
Yes, hyperphantasia. Cool. So this is just one study. There are like so many more studies looking at different things like what kind of career you're more likely to go into. And
Yeah, I was thinking of that. I'm just thinking of like people who make movies or make animations. I feel like they cannot be aphantasia
aphantasic.
because they cannot picture something.
So previous studies have found that people with aphantasia are more likely to pursue careers in STEM, whereas people
What's STEM?
with
Oh,
science,
tech.
technology, engineering, and math. Whereas people with hyperphantasia are generally associated with creative professions. That said, I think there are a few notable creatives who have aphantasia. So like some of the creators at Pixar, and this is just population average, you know, it doesn't mean that you can't create art just because you can't visualize.
Yeah.
I guess this is where we can end. This is what I wanted to talk about. So Adam Zeman, and his group, he wrote an article in Psyche magazine saying that there's this misconception, I guess, that people with aphantasia are maybe not suited to creative professions and whatnot. Basically, he was intrigued by the different stories that he heard and the different experiences that people told him about. So what they decided to do was mount an exhibition for aphantasic and hyperphantasic artists. And then they exhibited all of this. And anecdotally, I guess, to him, the artist's work are not distinguishable based on like whether you have aphantasia or not. But the point of departure is their creative process. So we shouldn't confuse visualization with imagination, which is the broader capacity for representing and reconceiving things.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like it's just really cool to me. So like I went down a lot of different rabbit holes about like memory and like things like verbal scaffolding, like how people with aphantasia are more likely to use words to help them remember things. And like not just like for studying facts and stuff, for like actually remembering how a room looks or something. Yeah, so I just thought it was really cool that everyone experiences the world differently and we don't know how other people are experiencing it.
I'm trying to manifest a star with my eyes open. It's not happening.
You're not a wizard. You're not
Hyperphantasia.
And as usual, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify. A like and a comment would really help us out.
You can also follow us on our social media, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, and feel free to DM us any questions.
Alternatively, you can email us at thelabdoctors@gmail.com. We'll post the links in the episode description so you can check that out. Thank you.
Bye.